You're listening to the International Moving Podcast, your guide to moving to another country, brought to you by SDC International Shipping, LA's finest. An international move is exciting. It's a time to start over, establish a new business maybe, reestablish family ties, or retire where your budget will do more for you. Please enjoy today's episode, and if you have any questions about your international move, give us a call at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962. Hey everyone, this is Jim for SDC International Shipping. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about some of the challenges people face when they're moving to another country. Now, when we talk about moving is an exciting time in a person's life, and maybe even more so when moving internationally, when moving to a new country, because in front of you there will be new experiences, new opportunities, and it really is a time for personal growth. However, in the middle of all the excitement, talking about what it would be like to move to another country and then following through and actually doing it, it's also important to acknowledge that there are some common problems that individuals face during this time of transition. Challenges do come with moving abroad, and today we're going to look at a handful of them, maybe 4 or 5, and these are just common problems that people encounter on the way, moving from here in the United States to another country, and I'm sure moving from other countries here to the United States, people face the same thing. But the goal in today's episode is to give you some information along with some tools to help you get past these obstacles. And I believe that when you're aware of what the challenges are, it's easier to prepare for them, and that way you can have a smoother transition and you can adjust to life faster in your new location in another country. So whether you're a seasoned mover or whether this is your first international move that you'll be undertaking, I think you'll find today's episode helpful. Number 1, let's start with the obvious. Let's start with language barriers. Moving to a country where the primary language is different from your own can create significant communication challenges. So it's important to have a basic understanding of the local language, and this will help you with daily interactions. Speaking the language and integrating into the local community, there are some strategies that you can employ to help overcome the language barriers. Number 1, we could talk about something like a simple language course. You can enroll in a language course, you can hire a private tutor to learn the local language, and you can start this entire process before you move. Also today we have language apps and other online resources. By utilizing language learning apps and online resources, you can practice and enhance your language skills at your own pace and at your own convenience. And also there are language exchange programs. So if you engage in this kind of program, then you can practice speaking the local language with native speakers, and you can also help them learn your language. That's what the language exchange program is. So that would take probably a little more time than, let's say, downloading, of course, an app and doing it on your own time. But it really depends on how much time that you have. Now, when we look at things like technology, there are several apps out there on the market that can translate languages audibly. Now, here are just some examples of those. Number 1 is called Speak and Translate. So whether you have an iPhone or an Android, this app will allow you to translate both voice and text. It has an offline speech-to-speech translation feature, and it supports many languages, and like I said, it's available at the App Store. So that would be probably one of the first ones that I would look at. It's called Speak and Translate. I love the idea, too, of the offline speech-to-speech translation feature. Next is iTranslate Voice. That's little I, like on iPhone, iTranslate Voice. And this app lets you speak in one language and then have it translated into another language audibly. It also has a feature that types out what you're saying in English so you can verify that it heard you correctly before translating, and that too is available in the App Store. Next, Google Translate. This app is available on iPhone and Android, and it can translate sentences between 103 different languages. It offers voice, image, and handwriting translations for many of those languages and can be translated bilingual conversations. It can translate those on the fly. It's completely free, and it really does set a high bar for accurate machine translation. I know many people have used this before in Facebook. When something is written, post it in a different language. I've even done that before. I've copied it and I've pasted it into Google Translate. And I've translated things from Spanish to English, Italian to English, German to English. Next is Microsoft Translator. This is the fourth one. It's another free app, and it's a personal translation app for 60 plus languages to translate text, voice, conversations, camera photos, and more. It's available on both iPhone and Android. Also, there is something called Translate by Speech, and this is a feature within the Google Translate app that allows you to translate spoken words and phrases. In some languages, you can hear the translation spoken aloud, and that's also available on Android devices. Now, these are just 5, but I'm sure there's probably more coming every day on the market, because this is just something that there will always be a need for this kind of service and for this kind of software or for these kinds of apps, because people are moving all the time. So these apps can be useful if you're just a traveler, you're going on vacation, and especially if you decide you're going to go ahead and you're going to move internationally and you need to be able to communicate with someone who speaks a different language. I saw a commercial for one of these products. I'm not sure which one it was. And basically somebody was in a hotel and they were speaking one language and the hotel employee was speaking another. And so they spoke into their phone and it translated their English into whatever language it was. And then the other person responded and then it translated that back into English again. So something like that is really tremendous. If you're 50 or over, this is something that we could have only dreamed about having when we were, let's say, in our 20s. All right, number 2. So that's probably one of the top challenges that people have when moving to another country. I would have to say that if I had my phone on me and I was using this translation app, if it works as well as advertised, then that might be one of the things that would make me a little lazy when it comes to maybe really learning the language, just using the voice app to go back and forth. But maybe in other ways it would help you learn the language faster because you're actually participating in it. You're learning not in a classroom setting, but in actual communication. Like, hi, can you tell me where the local restaurant is? Or can you tell me how to get to motor vehicles? And then you're actually asking in real world situations. And you could remember the phrasing and all of that as opposed to learning it maybe more mechanically, like we did back in the day in high school. If you were learning German for English, you would have to learn that there's the masculine, the neutral, and the feminine of the word the, whereas here in the English language we just have the. So you would have der, masculine, die, and das, 3 words in German. So being aware that there were 3 words for the word the, I guess, did help as far as your thinking and understanding goes. But when you're out there in the world and you're referring to, you're pointing to the car and the word is das, neutral, like the, das Auto, talking about pointing to a car, then I guess you would have to remember that that's where you would use that word instead of another word. I don't know. I don't mean to confuse people, but I'm just thinking about languages was one of those things where if we could just swallow the green pill and automatically we're speaking Chinese, Japanese, German, all of those languages, French, that would be cool. But unfortunately, there's a lot that goes into actually learning the mechanics of a language. So, all right, let's move on. Let's talk about cultural adjustments. Adapted to a new culture, that's exciting also. I think there's a lot of things to look forward to when you're in a new place, understanding and respecting things like local customs, their traditions, and the social norms. All of those things are important if you want to have a nice, smooth transition. So I think that if you're going to tackle this ahead of time, the first thing you probably need to do is research the culture and the traditions, as long as the social etiquette of your destination country. Don't just assume that, especially, I know a lot of times you hear that Americans assume a lot of things. Maybe we do, but we just assume that other people think and act like us, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So if you do your research and preparation up front, then I don't think you'll be in for as much of a shock when you get there. Also, you can probably find expat groups for any country that you want on Facebook that can help you connect with others who've already gone through this process. And that leads us to the next thing, open-mindedness. Approaching the new culture with an open mind, embracing the differences, and seeking to understand the local way of life. That will go a long way towards making that transition to a new culture. And especially number 3 would be interacting with locals. So maybe if you visit the country at least a few times before you decide to move there. Now, I could see examples of doing more research versus doing less research based on whether or not you know people already living there or you have family there, as opposed to not knowing anybody and not having any family there or going there by yourself. I could see where some people might do a little more research, others might do a little bit less. But with interacting with locals, if you're able to do that, then you can engage in local community activities, you can attend cultural events, and you can make an effort to build relationships with the locals to gain a deeper understanding of the culture. I know several of my friends temporarily moved to other countries. They rented they had living arrangements there, small hotels, motels, or apartments that they stayed in for several weeks, and they did this several times to become gradually acclimated to the culture and what was there, seeing if this is something that they really wanted to pull the trigger on and make happen in their lives before they did that. And so interacting with the locals went a long way towards realizing whether or not where they were going would be a good fit or not for them. And so when you do have expat communities also, which there are in many of these countries, not just people from the U.S., but from other countries as well. I know that, for example, Spain has a very large Irish expat community. But, okay, so interacting with locals, being open-minded, doing your research and preparing, I think those things will all help you make that cultural adjustment if needed. You know, some cultures are much, much different than our own. So some might require a little more preparation than others. Next, we could talk about suitable accommodation. So finding suitable accommodation in a new country, that is another thing that people often find overwhelming, especially if they're a newbie to the world of international moving. So, but no worries, the process can be fairly smooth, and here are some details that will be helpful if you've never moved before. Number 1, research housing options. So you probably aren't going to want to just buy something right away unless you're well familiar with the area. You're probably going to want to rent. You can start by researching the different housing options, the different kinds of housing that are available in your destination country, which means you can look into exploring apartments, houses, or even shared accommodations to determine which best suits your personal needs and your personal budget. Also, look for reputable real estate websites. You can also look through local classified ads and or expat forums. There's no reason why you can't do all of the above and do your due diligence when it comes to where you're going to live, understanding what your housing options are. These are very important because you want to be in an area where you feel comfortable. You don't want to get to a place that looks, kind of sort of okay, and then all of a sudden realize that all your belongings are there. Hey, this isn't what you signed up for. You didn't realize there was this long laundry list of things that you really don't find suitable. So when you combine things like the real estate businesses and websites, local classified expat forums, online searches, and you can get a much better sense of what the current market is like. I remember getting advice from a real estate agent once saying that most people go and they look at an area in the daytime, but they suggested also going several times during the night. And that way you get an idea of how loud or how quiet it is at your potentially new location, how it's going to be. I know some people said that they went to a location that was just peaceful and quiet in the daytime, but as soon as the sun went down, there were noises from local restaurants, and they were in an area by the water, and so even though the restaurants and the nightlife were on the other side, it echoed off the water, and so it was nothing to hear loud noises between 11 and midnight as things were wrapping up on the other side. And if they hadn't been aware of that, if they hadn't gone there during the evenings and they hadn't, taken the time to understand what the place is like, not just in the day, but also at night, they never would have known. So consider location. That's another thing. When choosing accommodations, consider the factors, the proximity of, let's say, your workplace to where you'll be living, or the distance to a school, or access to public transportation, or medical facilities, doctors, hospitals. When you are aware of the available amenities, grocery stores, healthcare, recreation, then you can decide to prioritize your preferences, and you have in the back, at least in the back of your mind, a list of must-haves, and then you can narrow down your options from there. Friends of mine moved out to the country, and they loved everything about it, and they bought an old country house. This is here in the United States, in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, the nearest grocery store was 45 minutes away. But they were aware of that. The real estate agent made it known to them at the time. It was one of the downsides of living where they were. And so, they just made a day of it. When it was time to go to the grocery store, they would go there, they would stock up on everything that they needed, and then they wouldn't return again. And it's not like when you're living in an area where all you have to do is go around the block to get a half a gallon of milk or some bread or whatever. If you have to make a long journey, then you have to know that up front. Next, engaging real estate agents. The local real estate agents, wherever you're going, are, or at least should be, potentially the most valuable allies that you'll have in finding suitable accommodations, because this is what they do for a living. A good real estate agent, and you may have to talk to several to find one that you're comfortable with, they should have the most in-depth knowledge of the local housing market and access to exclusive listings. They can assist you with negotiations and the legalities. So I would say reaching out to reputable agents who specialize in especially serving expats. These are the people that you want to schedule appointments with, and going from there to view potential properties. And of course, as I had already alluded to, visiting before committing. Whenever possible, you want to visit that country before making a final decision on your accommodation, because this is going to give you the chance to see everything in person. You can assess the neighborhood, the area, you can get a feel for the local lifestyle, and if it's not feasible to do it in person, then you can also consider requesting a virtual tour or arrange video calls with landlords and real estate agents for better understanding of specific properties. But after we talk about all of this, I would say that consider the first move more or less a temporary type of accommodation. If finding a permanent home seems challenging, and I mean, wouldn't it, if you've never been to this country before, if you've never been to this area before, or maybe you've been to the area but you've only vacationed there. I know a lot of times before people make a big move, they vacation at that location, or they've been there several times, which is understandable because then they begin to experience all of the pluses. They compare that place to where their home is at the time. And then, I mean, this is what happens throughout the world today, which inspires people to move. They find a place that they like better. They visit it several times. However, vacationing in a spot and living in a spot, there are things there that you just won't understand fully until you move, until you experience what it's like. And so that's why maybe having a temporary accommodation being the best fit as your landing pad, so to speak, when you're going to be making your initial move. This may be an apartment, a short-term rental, or staying with friends and family if they're there, but temporary accommodation gives you flexibility. You don't have to commit to something, especially considering the fact that moving internationally is quite involved to begin with. Doing a real estate transaction at the same time and moving into a permanent residence, that on top of the move itself can be a little bit overwhelming for a lot of people. So remember, finding suitable accommodation takes a little time and patience. It's not something that's worth rushing into. Start your search early, be flexible, and have alternative options in case your preferred choices aren't available. And these are just a few tips to help you be well equipped to navigate this process and eventually find the perfect place to call home in your new country. Next, we could talk about financial planning. Some people are better at this than others, and this is also true when it comes to moving internationally. Managing finances in a new country can be complex because we're talking about differences in currency, taxation, and the cost of living. So to ensure a smooth transition, consider putting some planning strategies in place. Like number one, creating a budget. Create a detailed budget. Take your time to do this. Don't rush through it because you'll miss things. But create a detailed budget that considers your income, all of your expenses, as well as savings goals, and research the cost of living in the destination country. That way you can make an informed financial decision. Again, this is something you really can't rush through. It may take you several weeks to really write it all out and compare it accurately. Next, banking and currency exchanges. Familiarize yourself with the local banking system. Understand what the process of currency exchange is. I was talking with people not long ago who moved from the United States to Mexico, and they were talking about the differences in the banking system there versus here, and how that worked, and how it was a little bit of a culture shock, that in and of itself. But consider opening a local bank account to simplify financial transactions as soon as you're able to in your destination country. Seek professional advice. This is huge. This may involve not just attorneys, but accountants. Maybe I could flip it, not just accountants, but attorneys. There are also people that have a degree in both. They're accountants and attorneys. But consider a financial advisor that has experience in dealing with expat finances for the destination country that you're going to, because they can provide invaluable guidance on what your tax obligations are. You know, sometimes people move to a new place, and yes, there's a lot of things to be aware of, and things like taxes, they just get the basic information, not realizing that they still owe taxes here in the United States because they're not giving up their U.S. residency. They still own property here in the United States. Some of them still have businesses. So it's important to get expert advice when it comes to your tax obligations, or else you can have a very unwelcoming surprise at the end of the year. And they'll also give you advice on investment opportunities if that's something that you're capable of doing, as well as retirement planning. All right, let's see. Let's talk about, finally, healthcare access. Accessing health services in a foreign country, it can be confusing, especially if you're faced with the language barriers, or there are many differences in the healthcare system in where you're going based on where you're coming from. But the first thing you probably want to do is research the healthcare system. So gain a comprehensive understanding, if possible, of the healthcare system in your new country. Talk to expats, talk to people who have been there and done that. Do your research online. Research the availability of the public and private healthcare providers. Understand what your insurance options are. Understand how their emergency services work. Do this upfront long before you move, and that way this isn't something that hits you at the last minute. Next, there is something called international health insurance, and the more I've looked into this, now I'm not giving you healthcare advice here, I'm just a little disclaimer, I'm just saying from my own researching time, being aware of healthcare access and international health insurance, international health insurance is a very popular option among expats traveling not just to one country but to multiple countries. And they use that to protect both themselves and their family. It's a very popular option, something you might want to look into. And this will provide coverage for medical emergencies, routine checkups, and other healthcare needs. And finally, you might want to do your best to find English-speaking doctors. And that's where the international health insurance comes in. You'll probably pay a little bit more, but you want guaranteed access, especially if you don't speak fluently the language of whatever country that you're going to. You want to be able to make sure that you're connecting with local or speaking with English-speaking doctors in that area and medical facilities where they're bilingual, speaking English in your new area, and establish a relationship with healthcare professionals who are able to effectively communicate with you, because it's really important, especially when someone's giving you options or explaining what the problem is, that you actually understand what it is they're saying. So if English is your only language, then make sure that your healthcare insurance provider, if you're going to go with international health insurance, you buy it. And you may, like I said, you may have to pay a little bit more, but it's worth it to make sure that you have access to English-speaking doctors, and that includes facilities where the doctors and nurses also speak English. So in conclusion, let me say this: moving to another country, there are some challenges. We talked about some of the most common ones today, and finding a reliable and efficient international shipping company, let's bring it back home now, is going to be crucial to ensuring a very smooth transition. Once you have everything down on paper, once you've talked to people, once you've put deposits down, from there, everything comes back to you making the actual move. At SDC International Shipping, we're here to help you navigate the entire process from start to finish. You can reach out to us at our website, sdcinternationalshipping.com, or you can call us directly at 877-339-0267. We'll answer your questions, do a detailed analysis of what you're moving, where you're moving to, and provide you with a customized plan to fit your budget. So that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening. Please share this podcast with a friend or two, and I'll see you in the next episode. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for listening. Whether you're relocating within the country or moving to the other side of the world, we're here to help from start to finish. Connect with us today at 888-779-3962. That's 888-779-3962.